Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Wormhole. Today we're taking a look at Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the second try at the Final Fantasy XIV as an MMO. The first time it did not do particularly well, but they've gone through a lot of changes in the process, pretty much redesigned a large portions of the game, managed to clean it up a lot, and it's back out now. So far, I've been enjoying it a lot, and I'm going to go over 5 pros and 5 cons as far as this game in its current state. Bear in mind, we are only a week out from release, so it's very possible that by the time you're seeing this, some of these cons and pros may either have changed or be no longer applicable at all. So let's get on in here. This is my character. Currently I'm a level 30 White Mage. So White Mage is an advanced job. You start with classes, and after getting certain conditions fulfilled by leveling classes, you get a job crystal after a quest. So let's log in here. And here you have con number 1. So this game has been plagued with server errors since launch. 1017 right here is everyone's favorite. Basically, right now the game does not have a proper queue, so you sometimes get put into a queue. Most of the time you just get a flat-out world is full message, and you get stuck trying this over and over. So before I continue on, I'll point out one of the pros, which is the music. The score for this game is fantastic, and you can probably hear that in the background. In fact, I'm just going to be quiet for a second and let you appreciate it as it goes silent. So there you go. So there's a lot of music like that throughout the game. It's very, very Final Fantasy. Obviously, a lot of the songs are either directly or strongly inspired by Final Fantasy songs. You have, of course, the victory fanfare when you've leveled up, as well as a couple other things. Ooh, little intro cinematic here. I'm just going to cancel that. So the score is great. You'll be hearing a lot of the music throughout this video. For now, I am going to cut here while I try and actually get onto the servers. See you soon. Alright, so we're back. So I'm just in the queue now. I actually got lucky this time, and it only took me a couple tries. Normally it can take upwards of sometimes 15-20 minutes to... I've heard stories of people being on there for hours. That doesn't seem to be the case on all servers, so it may be related to your choices of servers. Tomorrow during the day, Square is actually taking everything down to add additional worlds, and that's going to hopefully fix up some of the problems for that, which actually is another con that I'll bring up here, which is the slow reaction time from the developers. Now, generally speaking, for an MMO, especially at a launch, you tend to see a lot of issues. Anyone who's been through an MMO launch before is going to know that there's going to be a lot of downtimes. You might have queues. You might have a lot of problems getting into the games. But in this case, we're, as I said, a week out from release, and they haven't added any new servers, despite there being these massive crippling problems that have started as early as 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and people have been unable to play. So that's been a big ongoing issue for them. I don't know if that's their standard. They generally haven't had much else kind of going on, so I don't know if that's how they always will be, but that's something that's definitely stood out so far. So something to keep an eye on for the future. And so here we are in Final Fantasy. Very, very pretty game. The graphics are an extremely high quality, and this isn't even on the highest graphics settings. My PC doesn't really like the highest graphics settings all that much, but you know, look at the detail on like this crystal, the details on even just like the cloth, the detail on the texturing on that. It actually looks like fabric, which it still impresses me. It's even better when you get to like a sunny area and you kind of see the light reflecting off all kinds of things. But anyway, we'll see more of that as we go along. So let's take a look at another pro. Keep it even here. 2 make cons, and let's go for a second pro. In this case, one of the key features of this game, similar to Final Fantasy XI for those of you that have ever played it, is that you can actually level multiple classes. So as you're going through the game and you have reached around level 10, everything unlocks in this game based on doing story quests. So if you don't do your story quests, you pretty much don't get any of the fun stuff, even though you can still actually level. So with that in mind, when you get around level 10, you unlock the ability to swap classes. And swapping classes is easy. Once you've obtained the class through doing a little quick quest at the guild's main location, all you do is you swap your weapon. That's it. As soon as you swap your weapons around, you change classes. And you can actually keep different gear sets. So you can see these are my gear sets. I have one per class that I've unlocked. I've got my White Mage set, which is actually Conjurer is the base class. And it's White Mage because I have this little soul crystal here from a quest I just recently did. I've got Weaver, which is a crafting specialized in, of course, cloth and whatnot. ACN is Arcanist, and BTN is Botanist. It's a gathering class. Yes, gathering and crafting are classes in this game. Botany is particularly, I find it a little bit boring, but it's a lot more interesting than a lot of gathering. It's kind of weird that you have to do it completely on the side, but here, I'll show you swapping classes. So if I just choose to equip this set, see all my gear swapped. I've got now this book. Book is the weapon for Arcanists, and my hotbar even switched all down here. You do have a little cooldown between everything, but I'm no longer a White Mage. I no longer have access to my Cure or anything that I had, and I'm now an Arcanist. So, what's cool about this, other than the fact that it's amazing that you don't have to level up a new character just because you want to play a different class? Well, Square has taken into account the fact that people will be leveling classes a lot. As of right now, the endgame, as with most MMOs at release, is not the most complex out there. In fact, you don't have a whole lot. There is a raiding endgame, of course, but the main thing to do right now is going to be to level different classes. So, how did they take into account this? Well, most of the experience that you gain on your main class comes from doing story missions and various quests that you find around, of course, as in most MMOs. What's different about this one is that once you've gotten a class to a certain level, you get an experience bonus on any battle class. Now, battle classes are classes that are combat-oriented, so not the crafters, not the gatherers. You get a 50% bonus to the experience with that class. I'm just going to swap back over to my White Mage set since this area is too high level for me as my Arcanist. Sorry, Carbuncle. So yes, so you get all the experience from that. But then, of course, you've done the quests. They don't re-unlock. They don't force you to redo the same quests. What they do is they have a system that they call... Actually, I can show you one right now. It looks like one just popped up. They're called Fates. If you've played something like Warhammer Online or Guild Wars 2, you know them as public quests. It's essentially the same exact idea. These areas pop up on the map. Over here is this blue circle, and anyone that goes in participates and helps out, and afterwards you get rewarded based on your participation level. So with my little White Mage self, I'm just going to go over here, get off my Chocobo. My level's too high, yes, because you do get over-leveled, and so you do have this level sync, and that has dropped me down to level 29. So you can't just come in and start overpowering everything. It won't let you attack the mobs or participate in the actual combat or anything, but you can afterwards. So I'm just going to cast Stone a bunch of times here, and once this bar fills up, you'll see that you get some reward based on participation, which in my case is not going to be very high because I don't cast fast enough. On top of that, they have a system called Leves. That's L-E-V-E. I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but that's what it is. And those you can find in your quest journal. Now you get these allowances. Allowances are the total number of leaves that you are allowed to complete currently. The leave quests you can have up to 16 at a time, but allowances is your total available. Now that's the same for all classes. You share it across things and you get more allowances in real time. Every 12 hours you get an extra 3. So it's generally not a great idea to blow them all on your main class. They're primarily for leveling your alt classes. And along with all of that, as I said, you do get an experience bonus of 50%. So 50% bonus on all the quests that you do if you have any quests that are left over. All those things. You have dungeons as well. You have this duty finder, which is a cross-realm party system. And so you can do different dungeons at lower level. They also have these guild hests, which essentially is a small 5 to 10 minute long quest done in an instance with a party. And these are primarily so far have been like kind of training exercises. It starts out teaching you how to pulp enemies. You're learning how to deal with enemies with a lot of armor, how to progress through a different series of engagements, learning about enemies using tactics and ground targeted attacks, status effects, all that kind of stuff. It kind of eases you in very nicely. But they're still also good for going through and getting your experience that way. And so that's kind of the main way that you get experience, is through these LEVEQUESTs, as well as doing instances and the fates. So the fates are probably the best way, but not only that, but to encourage people to actually get out in the world, they have these things called hunting logs. Hunting logs are per class, so as a conjurer right now I have to kill big mouth Orobons, Mamul, Ja infiltrators, Gigantoads, that kind of business. It tells you where they are. Go away, Condor. So it tells you where they are, and it's per class. So if I take a look at my Arcanist one here, I've already cleared a bunch, but I have to kill the Karn Egg Diggers still. Gonna get distracted by some combat here, it looks like. And those give you a bunch of experience as well. Not only do you get experience for completing this particular goal, which is not generally very hard, to kill 3 enemies of that specific type, but if you clear the entire rank, you get a big experience bonus at the top there, as well as unlocking the next tier of it. I better heal, or is I going to die? So those kind of, not only do those give you specific extra experience bonuses, but they also encourage you to go out in the world and find level appropriate areas for you. And while doing that, you will of course come across fates in those areas. So it's a very natural, kind of fluid way to level up your alt classes. And that is great news if you are traditionally an altaholic, because you don't have to remake a new character and keep adding people to your friends list, get reinvited to your buddy's guild, blah blah blah. It's all just ready to go for you. If you change classes, you're still part of the same guild, which is called a free company in this game. And so that's kind of how that's set up. So that was kind of a long-winded one for point 2 of the pros. So let's move on to point number 3 of the negatives. So far, this the Square Enix website, now this is going to be a little bit nitpicky sounding, but they have an extremely poor website design. I don't mean like it's not good, I mean it's extremely terrible. The way that their website has been laid out during the initial release and the pre-order phase for people has been atrocious. They have successfully confused me, and not just me. I've had to make... They have a system where you have 2 different logins. One of them's for the main Square Enix account, but the other one is for some members site, but they're not the same account, so it's not using the same info, but sometimes it seems like it tries to, but it doesn't work. And long story short, a lot of people had problems with their early access trying to figure out how the hell you redeem it, because you had to redeem it on one account, which was not the main Square account that you actually used to purchase the game or anything. But then after you purchased it and used the code on this other account, it would give you another code that you then had to use on your main Square account, and it was just like confusing for nothing. Why do you need to have multiple codes? Why do you have to have all these things? Just redeem it on the main site. That's all that should have been done. That's how MMOs have always done it. I don't know why they felt the need to be special. Not only that, but post-release as well, when the time came to actually register your serial code for the game, a lot of people had issues with that as well. You would think that might be surprising, because it's not a new concept. Just stick a code in, even if you have to do it in multiple spots, which this one you didn't. It was one spot. It's a different spot than all the other codes, mind you. They have a system called Mog Station, which is where you handle your subscriptions and all that business. And with that, they managed to make it so that they used weird terminology. It would ask people if they wanted to add an account or add a platform. And most people on PC, when they think of platform, they don't think of PC as a platform, even though it really is. You hear platform and you would think, okay, well, PS3, because this game is cross-platform, which is one of its pretty cool selling points. I don't have it as a pro because it's not that revolutionary. They did it in FF11 as well, and a couple other games have tried it as well. But you can do cross-platform play, sorry. Now, when you're registering that, if you choose that you want to do a new account, it actually seems fine. Nothing stands out as being weird. But when you've completed the process and used your code, it will actually have put it into a whole other account entirely, which if you had early access, you just linked your actual game time to an account that doesn't have your early access items or any of your privileges. And that's not good when you potentially reserved early because you wanted to support the game for that. Now, that didn't happen to me. I don't know anyone that did happen to, because once I found out, I did notify my friends to make sure that no one would have that issue. But there's been a lot of people on the forums that have had issues and have had to try and contact Square Enix support to kind of get that all sorted out. So as far as I know, they are working on it, and they have been working on resolving it and getting it sorted out. But as of right now, I don't know if there's a permanent resolution. So I'm just going to be doing a leave quest here right now. So these guys have little cards over their head to show you that they're part of the leaves. Other players cannot see them until I attack them, and then they can help me out with them. So it's kind of like a little mini quest. It's not instanced, but only I can see the objectives, so it's in a way kind of like a little similar to the phasing for World of Warcraft. But yeah, so the website design, not great. So far it hasn't been a huge impact, and they do have some really cool things about their website. They do have a system called that they call the Lodestone. That is a pretty neat system, I have to say. There's a lot of cool information on there. It's kind of like the Armory from World of Warcraft, but not exactly, and they give a lot more details. You can see like feeds of when your friends have logged in and all kinds of cool stuff. It's very, very neat. They have some cool ideas, but poor implementation on some of the more essential things like account management. So, on to Pro number 3, which is going to be something similar to what I mentioned earlier. It eases players into MMO concepts. Not just MMO concepts, but general gameplay mechanics very well. There's a lot of easy-to-follow tutorials early on. There's a lot of kind of easing you in through those guild tests that I mentioned earlier, where it's kind of like mini tutorials showing you how different things work. And so it's pretty straightforward. You don't really have a lot of confusion. They show you point by point how to, how to recommend pulling things, how they don't really show you how aggro works, but it's not all that difficult to figure out when you're actually in a group of people and that kind of thing. So that is one of the better points. At this point, most of the people that are playing it probably already know most of that stuff, but especially if you're coming from certain other MMOs that don't necessarily have a lot of difficulty or need to actually pull things lately. World of Warcraft, I'm looking at you. You might not be familiar with crowd control, how to manage that kind of stuff. And the game does a pretty decent job of kind of walking you through it in a fairly easy scenario with friends to sort it out. So that one's pretty brief, but we'll go on to the next con, which is that there's currently no PvP. Now, this isn't everyone's cup of tea. I know a lot of people don't really like it. I personally enjoy PvP in my MMOs, not as full-time, but I like to have the option, especially if the combat system is good. I like to dip into it every now and then. And the combat system in this game I find to be very good. They have said, however, that they will be putting in PvP at one point. I don't know what form it's going to take just yet. It's probably going to be the usual type of like battlegroundy arena type stuff, but there hasn't really been any details yet. Currently, that patch is going to be in their first major content patch, which is currently planned for around the beginning of the year, so around in January 2014. So we'll probably get some news around closer to then as to what exactly all the details will be, but for right now, that's all we really have to go on. I would say it's a missed cause, but they clearly know that they want to put it, and they basically just avoided wasting the release time by delaying it even further for that. I suspect in Final Fantasy there's probably not as much of a demand for PvP, but there are always MMO players that do like their PvP, so it's definitely good that they want to include it. So, more on that as it comes. Ooh, gotta dodge that. Now you're probably noticing there's little red marks sometimes on the ground. Those are to show where the enemy's attacks are going to hit. It's a pretty good system for getting out of the way. It's a little bit more visible than some games have had it, and it takes a little bit of the guessing out, but does not necessarily make it outright easy. So, next Pro. The game is not really afraid to be hard. I know what you're thinking. It's a new game. People are still learning how to play it. It's by MMO standards, it has its moments where it's considerably harder. I've already had a couple quests where, just in the process of the normal quest, I have died because of having to do specific types of things, not something complex or convoluted, but instead of trying to just burn down the main quest enemy like you would normally be used to in some games, having to manage the ads, or crowd control them, or worry about having to heal you because you can die really quickly with a lot of things attacking you. In instances, there's times where the bosses have strategies that are not readily apparent, forcing a lot of movement. And I don't mean just at high levels like in some games, although lately MMOs have in general been getting a bit better about that, about introducing more cool mechanics early on. But they have this in the first instances. The bosses, while not overly complex, still easing you in a little bit, they do have some mechanics that force you to get in and out of the way, dodge things, interact with stuff during the fights, and it quickly ramps up from there. That's also readily apparent in the not guild quests, that would be the wrong term. There's a lot of special terms in this game. The class quests. Every 5 levels you have a quest for your class that gets you some new gear, sometimes new skills. Those sometimes are not easy. You can get in there, and I had one in particular where I had to fight an enemy that would heal itself from enemies during the fight that were also attacking me while casting spells, while doing a lot of damage and paralyzing me and causing status effects, and I had to dodge his petrification gaze. So, and that's at level 30. That was my level 30 class quest. I don't know what's going on with this guy. He's kind of invisible. Oh, stealth. There you go. First experience with stealth in this game. So, there's a lot kind of going on with that. It's not always super clear the way that things are laid out. And it can be difficult. There's the first trial, which is kind of a cool event. I won't spoil it for anyone, but it's a very neat encounter that you get to have. The boss has a one-shot kill mechanic if you don't DPS down a specific thing during the fight at one point. They do call it out. The NPCs will call it out for you, but typical players, being typical players, often don't notice that, and it can lead to a party wipe. Game's not mean about it, it just basically restarts you at the beginning of that fight, and you just kind of continue on from there, but it does happen. So, on to our final con, which is, despite a lot of these tutorials that ease you so nicely into the game is lacking a lot of info. Now, I know that might sound kind of contradictory, but bear with me for a second. So there's all these things, all these different cool systems. You got the guild quests, you got guild leaves, you got grand companies, you got free companies, you got classes, you got jobs, you've got skills, you've got cross-class skills, you've got all these neat concepts, hunting logs, crafting logs, gathering logs, so much to do, so much to see. But the game doesn't do a great job of really making it super clear what all that stuff actually means sometimes. It's very easy for someone to accidentally have glossed over a lot of the details. For example, I've got a pretty good grasp on it, but I've been reading all of the text and all of the tutorials. A couple of my friends have been playing this game since the release, and they kind of skim most of the text. And needless to say, there's a lot of confusion sometimes when we're having a conversation about how cool guild hests are, and they're talking about leaves instead, or vice versa, or you're talking about something specific and they have no clue what that means because they don't know the proper term for it. The game throws a lot of very specific game terms at you very quickly at the early stages. Around level 10 to 15 there's a lot going on, and it's very easy to kind of get them all mixed up. In fact, I'm surprised that a lot of people don't miss out on a lot of things. Things happen very quickly. The tutorial text kind of comes up. If you read it, great. If you've read it, you probably might need to reread it a couple times to understand what the difference is from the last pop-up that you just had. But it somehow doesn't get it sunk in enough. Along with that, there's parts of the game that don't explain what they mean. So I mentioned earlier that you get souls of job classes, and what exactly that means in this... Let me just summon my carbuncle. So what that means is that as you're playing through the game, you are leveling your classes. So in my case, I leveled Conjurer up to about 50. I knew I wanted to be a White Mage right off the bat, because White Mages are awesome, and I always play healers in MMOs. So I mentioned that it's through a combination of classes. In my case, I needed this class, the Arcanist, to be level 15. It's always level 30 and level 15 from what I've seen so far. Now, that wouldn't be too much of a problem, but the game doesn't tell you that anywhere. You have to kind of either intuitively guess that, assume it based on some of the gear that you might find, which is not necessarily a good way of doing it at all, as I found out when I suggested to my buddy that he try that to determine what he needed for Black Mage. There's no indication, so he leveled to 30 in Thaumaturge, which is the base class for Black Mage, and we were looking at things and figuring, okay, well, you know, let's take a look right here. You got these cross-class skills, right? So you can click on them and see this is usable by Gladiator, Pugilist, Marauder, Lancer, Archer, Conjurer, Thaumaturge, Arcanist, Paladin, White Mage, Scholar. Cool. So intuitively you could figure, okay, well, Paladin, White Mage, and Scholar would be usable. Would be it's somehow related to this class, because the jobs can only use the skills from their classes. But that's not true. There's actually some other classes, like for example Thaumaturge. To become a Black Mage, you need Archer, not Arcanist, which is the other DPS caster class. Arcanist skills are usable, because my buddy sees that, and we assumed that that meant that that was the class. He leveled it to 15, and he did not have any indication of his quest to get his job. Along with that, the game did not tell him, hey, by the way, you close to unlocking the Black Mage. You just need X class, or some kind of, you know, more subtle way of saying it maybe than just that. But there was no indication. There was nothing to go on for that. So we had to go to the internet, figure it out, Google it, which, you know, whatever, it's Google, it's there, it's for that. But for something fairly core like the class system, your player shouldn't have to be looking everything up on the internet to figure out how your game works. That's not very good game design in the long term. Short term, fine, because a lot of people will be talking early on, there won't be too much issues. Even in the long term, there'll be a lot of wikis, people will have their, you know, their armories and things that they'll be looking up for information. But you shouldn't require that from your players. It's not everyone looks up things on the internet. Some will just get frustrated and not figure out how they can be an awesome Black Mage that casts fireballs. But other than that, that's pretty much all of my negatives, and for some of these I had to stretch myself pretty far to kind of come up with some. Some are more or less relevant or prevalent. But let's take a look at the last pro. Now, if you've been watching this whole time, and obviously you have, otherwise you're not listening to this part, or you cheated and skipped ahead conveniently to right when I said that, you might have seen a lot of things or heard me reference a lot of other MMOs, specifically mostly World of Warcraft, since that's the big bugbear, of course, in the MMO world. Everyone's got to be like World of Warcraft. The game has a lot of similar concepts to things you've seen before, or you would have seen before if you were a MMO player. And by the way, yes, there is already gold spam. That's awesome. It happened the second day of release. So, what's the pro about using a lot of concepts? It's done really well. They took a look at what is in a lot of MMOs and kind of just tweaked them. The Fate system, for example, as I said, is like Public Quest and Guild Wars 2, and Warhammer Online had a similar thing. I'm sure it's been done in other games before, so please don't get angry and yell at me that it's not original to that. But the first game, as far as I know, that used it is Warhammer Age of Reckoning. They've got the, obviously, Dungeon Finder, similar to WoW. It is cross-server at launch, which is pretty cool, and very few games seem to have actually bothered doing that for whatever reason. So that's kind of a big tip of the hat for that. They've got ease of transport with a lot of teleporting, similar again to Guild Wars. You don't have like a Hearthstone, though you do have a return, but you can also just use this to travel to anywhere you've visited before. So that's what those big crystals in the towns are. You bind yourself to the crystal, and then you can unlock that as a teleport point. You also have a bind point where you can use return for free. This all costs you money. It costs gil, of course. This is Final Fantasy. So, along with all that, you know, it's got a good class system. It's got a lot of things borrowed, of course, from Final Fantasy XI. It is essentially the sequel to Final Fantasy XI. in many ways, including the fact that they had the whole, you know, alternate class thing and you don't have to make a new character, although they kind of took it a little bit further with this one, but nonetheless, it does remain from that. There's not a lot of customization, but the customization there is sort of interesting with the whole cross-class business. You can, you know, grab skills like on my Arcanist here. I can grab any of these skills. I can hold up to 3. If I had more classes, I could grab from them too, but I haven't really done a whole lot of other classes just yet. But the base classes can take from any of the other classes, and the jobs can only take from specific ones, so it kind of limits you a little bit. If you go into the specialized classes, they are specialized for a reason. So it does kind of give you that little bit of extra stuff. It's very polished. I mean, graphically, you can probably tell this is a very, very pretty looking game. There, come on, target it. The animations are cool. I love this little caster animation. The Arcanist has my favorite casting animation I've ever seen in an MMO so far. It just looks so awesome. And yeah, they've even got materia system to kind of do enchantments similar to, you know, WoW, EverQuest, take your pick. It's been in most games. The way that works is a little bit different though, because you have this cool thing actually that I forgot to mention. It's called the Armory Chest. You get a lot of gear in this because obviously changing weapons and gear and classes and all these things, you have a lot of different sets of gear. So your inventory would get full pretty quick. So they give you an Armory Chest. This stores nothing but equipment. So that is pretty sexy. You can have all kinds of different stuff. I got lots of things here, all different levels of stuff. So I'm kind of keeping most of my stuff for now because as I'm leveling up other classes, you'll want to have some gear on hand for it. And from Quest you can take stuff that you can't even use like this here, so that way when I level one of these classes, I'll be able to actually use that later on. So that's a pretty neat little system. And you get this thing called Spirit Binding. So the weapon I have equipped right now, which is this guy here, Engraved Leather Grimoire. As you can see down, unfortunately I can't really mouse over it because it'll go away, but down in the lower section under Crafting and Repairs there's a Spirit Bond 100%. Essentially, as you get experience with gear on, you will get Spirit Bond with it. And Spirit Bond is kind of neat. I think I actually do have another of this book? A really high level one? I don't have the same book, unfortunately. But if... You know what, I'm not going to use this. I've already got it. So... No, I can't do it to this one, of course. Do I have anything that's 100%? Something. Well, unfortunately I don't have an example for you right now. But basically you right click it and you can choose to convert, which turns it into materia. So let me find my materia. I got some here. So depending on the thing, it'll create different stats based on the stats that were on the item. So you can get like intelligence, spell speed, what else do I got here? That's not materia. Yeah, there's that. I have other materia somewhere that's kind of all over the place. Piety, wind resistance. So there's all kinds depending on your stats. And that basically is the enchantments. So to encourage you to constantly have new gear, which then in turn encourages crafters to continue crafting and not just only make high level stuff, and creates a demand throughout the game, you are constantly able to convert your gear into materia, which then you enchant into gear that you want to use more long term and make it stronger. So certain pieces of gear, like nothing I have equipped right now, but if I go back to my armory chest, I do have a robe, so it's got those 2 materia slots, so I can stick 2 pieces of materia in there. The big catch, unfortunately, is that you do have to have a crafter of the right kind. So in this case, materia melding, as you can see down below, is by Weaver, level 31. So I would have to be level 31 on my crafting class to be able to socket my own materia. So you can get someone else to socket it. There is actually a trade option for it, similar to things in like World of Warcraft, where you could open like a trade window and do materia or enchantment socketing without having to actually trade the items. But yeah, it's kind of a neat system. Hey guys, sorry about that. Apparently my hard drive filled up because 1080p videos take a lot of power. So that's already quite a large video. But we'll wrap it up a little bit more. Unfortunately, it lost some footage because it didn't notify me that there was a problem. But you get to see this cool little sunrise and this neat little place over here. So, what I was in the middle of saying before it apparently cut me off was about the materia system, and I think I pretty much said everything I needed to say about that there. The last thing was that I had just gone through a guild test, this one here, under the armor, to kind of show that off. I'm just going to go through that. Let's instead do enemy strongholds, because I don't feel like doing the same one again. So, like most games, if you're a healer or a tank, you get really good queue times. If you're a DPS, you'll probably be crying and potentially waiting upwards of 40 minutes to an hour. I'm sorry, DPS, that's your cross to bear, especially in this game because there is only 4 people in a group, so that's 1 less DPS than traditional group size. And there's only 1 tank and 1 healer at low levels, 2 of each at high levels once you take advanced jobs into account. I still don't think that's enough because there's a total of 9 advanced jobs, so that still seems like not enough to me. So this is my little group here, so of course being a white mage, I am going to be responsible for the healing. I'm just going to cast my little Protect, which kind of doubles as Shell because of my Conjurerness. So you get a little kind of summary of the objectives here and everything. Hey guys. Alright, so this one is to show you about progressive advancement through objectives. So this is going to be about breaking into this enemy stronghold and opening gates along the way. So, being a healer, you're a very bad healer if you're the type that just sits there and waits for someone to heal. You should be doing stuff constantly, provided that your mana can sustain it, of course. At this point, at the low-level stuff, you really don't have to worry about that. There's a couple things that are interesting about grouping in this game. One being that if you are level synced, which you saw happen earlier and happens automatically in dungeons, you don't just scale your abilities down, you actually lose the abilities if you didn't have it at that level. So that kind of messes with my hotbar a lot. Like here I don't have access to, I do have Pure Bar, but I don't have Stone 2, I don't have Pure 2, I don't have Woes, so I can't craft these things. So every skill, even though like Stone and Stone 2 you think you just be upgrade of Stone 1, they're not. They actually do different things. Like Stone 2 does 170 damage, or 170 potency, sorry, with no special effects. It's the same cast at lower mana cost, lower potency of 140, but it snares people 40% less speed for 20 seconds. So there's always a reason to continue keeping the old versions on your bar, so don't be super quick to get rid of them. By the way, I would suggest customizing the color of your party members because the default color is really hard to see, in my opinion anyways. It's very easy to lose people in the crowd. It's almost the same color as normal players that aren't grouped with you. Now you see up here, you get this limit break bar. That's one of the other neat things about this. Limit breaks are only available inside of dungeons and guild tests. The way it works is as you proceed and kill stuff, you fill up the bar by doing various actions, basically play the game until it's bar filled. That cures. So what happens once it's full? Well, party heals. It's only one person activates it, but it is a party-wide bar. So don't be too quick to just waste it on whatever because you don't get enough once the bar fills again. Usually this is reserved for the DPS to do because the healer one just basically heals everyone, and if you're doing your job as a healer that isn't needed. The tank one just gets you a bunch of enmity, which is the threat of this game. And again, if you're doing your job, you don't need that, whereas you always need more damage. So at this part here, we have to kill this ledge leaper, ideally before all of his reinforcements get through that wall. So you can see the boulders got health, they're plinking away at it, through, and then they'll start attacking us. I need to be paying attention and catching these people now. So this is the kind of boss guy of this instance. Still not particularly hard, this is still one of the earlier instances, so I can afford to be a little distracted right now. And yeah, that's kind of the general how the party stuff works. Your HP and MP and everything regenerates pretty quick outside of combat, so you don't have to worry too much about running too low. Just go through the rock wall there. Now this is where if I can CC, I shoot, but unfortunately I don't have access to repose at this level. Now, our tank is being a good little tank there and trying to draw all their threat. Most tanks just ignore it and leave me to heal myself. I can really heal tank these type of things if they're not too bad, and I can heal a lot more than they can do damage for right now. There you go, duty complete. We are super awesome. Everyone loves that victory fanfare, man. The music in this game, as I said, is amazing. Now, when you finish these, you gotta make sure you talk to this guy really quick, because if you don't, you will lose out on your rewards, because I don't know why. That's a weird design thing. It should be an automatic thing, or not kick you out until you interact with them. In dungeons, you get like a random loot chest that you can pick up, and they'll have sometimes potions or gear. That's how you get the gear from bosses. There's no loot from corpses. You probably noticed that throughout the video. It just appears directly in your inventory, which is awesome. So awesome. In instances, you do have little chests that give you the loot, though. So to make sure that you don't accidentally leave or get kicked out before you've looted, you actually have to interact with an exit portal. I don't know why they didn't do something similar for the guild tests, but they didn't. So, oh cool, you get to see daylight now. Look at that lens flare. So pretty. Cloth texture is super nice. This game, I mean, as I said, this isn't even on the highest settings. I wish I could play on the highest settings. My machine doesn't really not like it. There's so much nice details in this, and the vistas and things, the long distance, the views and everything are just phenomenal. There's one spot every time I run outside. There's like it looks kind of like the you know, the stereotypical Arizona kind of landscape, and every time I walk out of the town there, it just looks pretty. In fact, let's actually just go there right now. Hopefully it's daytime there as well. Is Little Alameda. This is one of the higher level areas. It's for about level 25 to 30-ish. So I won't fight anything on this class. Oh no, this is my mage, actually. Yeah, I could fight things. Thought I was still on Arcanist for some reason. The world's pretty large as well, which is kind of neat. There's definitely a lot of things to do between all the fates. Some of the fates give you special minions as well. Where's the door? There it is. It's not the door that I like, though. Even like these walls, look at this texturing on the walls, it's so nice. It actually looks like rock. And this is an MMO, and it runs pretty well on most systems. And if you have a crappy PC, get it on PS3. You can play with people still. It's awesome like that. This. I don't know why this view, when I come out of here, these rocks off in the distance, the trees, the cactars, people are gonna yell at me. It's just, I don't know, there's just something about the art style of this game. It's high graphic fidelity. It looks almost photorealistic, but you know it's not because they aren't exactly going for that, but damn, does it not look good. So with that, I think we'll leave this look at Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. I am going to be putting out additional videos about this game, because it's a game I'm personally really enjoying a lot right now, and I want you guys to enjoy it as well. So I'm going to be following up with patch developments as they come, cool things that I've seen, showing off some of the features, possibly even doing some tutorials for different aspects to kind of clear up some of the whole guild quest, test, leave, class, job shenanigans that are abounding in this game right now. And there you go. So, let's look at Final Fantasy, A Realm Reborn. Dat music.